So in this video, I'm going to show you how to work with confidence interval in Stata. And so to start off, you'll see I've got Stata already opened. I've got data already loaded into Stata. This is the set of variables up here. Over here are the characteristics of the data set. And this particular data set, just for background, is a data set from the New Jersey Department of Education that has every public school in the state of New Jersey during the 2018-19 school year. So that's the data set that we're working with. And so let's say we want to construct a confidence interval around something. And before we get started, just something to note is when we're constructing a confidence interval, so we can do that with any continuous variable. We can also do that with a binary variable, which is a kind of categorical variable that only has two categories. And so you can calculate a proportion of the number of the observations who fit into one category and the other and construct a confidence interval around that. But for a categorical variable where you've got three or more categories, you can't do a confidence interval around that because you can't take a mean from that. So to start off, we'll say that we want to use this variable here, economically disadvantaged students. So this is a variable that is the percentage of students at each of the 2,510 schools in New Jersey in that year. What percentage? So for each school, it's the percentage of students who are identified as economically disadvantaged. So one thing that we might want to do is just start with some descriptive statistics. And one way to do that is with the tabstat command. And the reason why we might want to look at some descriptive statistics is because the confidence interval comes from, we calculate that using a few other pieces of information. So we need the number of observations, we need of a variable, we need the mean for that variable and the standard deviation of that variable. We use that to calculate the standard error of the mean, and then we use the standard error to construct a confidence interval. And so I've started here with the tabstat command, and then I can just drop in this variable here for economically disadvantaged students, and then I can specify as the options here that I want the number of observations, the mean, the standard deviation, and then the standard error of that mean. So I can just hit enter, and you can see that it comes up that there were 2,500 schools that report the percentage of economically disadvantaged students. So the average percentage of students who are economically disadvantaged across these schools is 35.6%. Then we can see the standard deviation and the standard error. And one thing to just note is the standard error here is fairly small at about just a little under 0.6%. And one reason for that is because we actually have a fairly large number of observations in our data set. And so that's just something that you'll see that larger data sets tend to have smaller standard errors. So then if we wanted to construct a confidence interval, we could do that if you wanted to use the rule of thumb, like for a 95% confidence interval. You can just use plus or minus about 2 standard errors from the mean. And that's kind of your rule of thumb. If you wanted to be more precise, because technically a 95% confidence interval is plus or minus 1.96 standard errors, you can just use this command right here. So it's CI, and then you want to say mean, so it's going to give you a confidence interval for the means. And then you can just put one or even more variables here if you would like. So this is the command that you use. It's the CI command. When you specify means, you put your variable or variables that you want to look at. So you just hit enter. And so what this will show you is a lot of the same information down here. So it shows the number of observations, it'll show you the mean. By default, this doesn't show you the standard deviation, but it shows you the standard error, which is computed using the standard deviation. And then it gives you a 95% confidence interval around the mean. So here, the average percentage of students who are economically disadvantaged across schools in New Jersey is 35.6. The 95% confidence interval around that is 34.5% to 36.7%. And so the way that you would interpret this is you would say the percentage of students, or the average percentage of students who are economically disadvantaged across New Jersey schools in 2018-19 is 34.5% to 36.7%. So that's all that you would need to do to just get the confidence interval for one variable. If you wanted to do this by categorical variables, you can do that by just including a conditional statement. So if you wanted to look at, say, only schools, in this case I have a variable for county, so county name. So if I only wanted to do this for schools in a particular county, so I can just bring up the data here and say we want to just use Atlantic County. So that's a string variable, so I'll just need to use quotes. So county name. And so you'll see it did the same thing, but it has fewer observations because this is just a number of schools that were in Atlantic County, for instance. And it gives them the mean percentage of economically disadvantaged students in that county for schools in that county, and then the standard error, and then the confidence interval. And you'll see here that the standard error is a little bit larger, and part of that is going to be because it's, just a lot fewer observations here. So that's how you can calculate use Stata to calculate a confidence interval, 95% confidence interval around a mean for a continuous variable, and how you could also do that for a group within your data. In this case, I was looking just within a particular county.